Hello and welcome to Love is a Battlefield, the DV podcast. My name is Tilly Moore and this is episode 19. 19! There was an ad on TV in Australia years ago where they went, 19! I think it was for the lotto. You know that thing where you win millions? Well, you don't actually, do you? I mean, some do. Anyway, welcome. Episode 19 is called Boundaries. Why are boundaries important with domestic violence? Well, let me tell you. I didn't even know what the word boundaries meant until I did a domestic violence course many years ago. That's when I learned what boundaries were and that I didn't have any. And, well, I mean, we'll have some without even knowing what they are, but I didn't even know what they were. So how was I meant to have them and be conscious? Like, once you are conscious of what boundaries are, you can consciously have them and practice putting them into practice, and then you are safer. But obviously that was before a very, very, very bad, evil person came into my life. But they were manipulated. They were, I speak the Gooda in Galicia. They were a manipulator. And so there are people who can sort of manipulate their way past things, but generally my boundaries have helped me dodge so many bullets. It was just the most evil bullet, snuck its way through. But honestly, now knowing what boundaries are has helped me. And if there's anyone out there, I really doubt that people don't know what they are, because I didn't. I was a mother of two, grown ass. I had no idea what the word boundaries meant. I knew the boundary in like a cricket pitch, like you can't go over a certain line. I didn't know what personal boundaries meant. Is that like really stupid? Oh well. Anyway, so let's get into it. So there's a few websites I've looked up and just seeing what they're saying, like how they're describing it to people. How do you tell someone what a boundary is who doesn't know what a boundary is? And we've got Broxtowe, I think that's a place in the UK, Broxtowe, Women's Project.org.uk. They say relationship boundaries are a set of rules we can put in place to protect ourselves from being abused or taken advantage of by others. Yes. They are like an imaginary wall around us. These boundaries will determine how physically or emotionally close we will allow others to be with us and what sort of treatment we would accept and not accept from them. The boundaries that we set will be different depending on the person and our relationship with them. If we're shouted at and hit by our lively 2-year-old, this behaviour is not likely to violate us in the same way that similar treatment by our intimate partner, like an adult, would. We may be happy for close family to come physically very close to us. However, if a stranger came this close, we may feel our physical boundary or personal body space has been invaded. Boundaries should be flexible and adjusted as circumstances change and relationships develop. There is a strong association between having strong boundaries and high self-esteem, and conversely, low boundaries and poor self-esteem. That was me when I was a young lass. Having strong boundaries in place demonstrates that we're protecting ourselves because we feel that we are worthy. Yes, you are, and deserving of such protection. You are worthy and deserving of boundaries. Yes. Oh, there's something I want to say, but I'm going to wait. I'll wait. ADHD. Relationship boundaries are very often damaged by domestic abuse, you think? Understatement. When the perpetrator insults, humiliates, and belittles us, he has likely trampled over our emotional boundaries. If he assaults and rapes us, this behaviour will break down our physical boundaries. If we had strong boundaries at the start of the relationship, repeated attacks on those boundaries will weaken and ultimately dismantle them. We may have started the relationship feeling certain we'd refuse to be controlled by a partner. However, countless small incidents of controlling behaviour may creep up on us, repeatedly breaching our boundaries, causing further weakening on each occasion until they are effectively destroyed and we accept the controlling behaviour we are being subjected to because we have no defences left. We become not only accepting of abuse from the perpetrator, but because we have weak or non-existent boundaries, we are more likely to accept abusive behaviour from others too. Other people will often detect weak or absent boundaries and hone in and attack and abuse. Sorry, they wrote home in. Is it hone in or home in? Like I've always thought, I've never written it in my life, said it. I thought it was hone, like Hone, but I've never seen it written. This is the first time. You know when you've said a word lots, but then it's the first time you've seen it written and you're like, is it home in? Because I guess that makes sense. I used to say hone. Oh, goodness. Help me. Does everyone naturally have relationship boundaries? I sound like I'm reading a kid's book. Hey, kids. Most of us have relationship boundaries. Some have strong boundaries. Others will have weaker boundaries. Without them, we would be very vulnerable to serious abuse on a habitual basis. I feel personally called out by that because not knowing what a boundary was, and now reflecting on parents' childhood and lack of boundary situations in that, and seeing a lack of boundaries in certain parental figures, I can see where I got the no boundaries from, and the fact that I wasn't allowed to have boundaries as well growing up. It's that's a whole deep dive that's not going to happen, but you can just sort of see, I can see where that came from and why I didn't know. But gee, this is so right, so vulnerable to abuse, and not just once. Like repeat offender. Well, we're not the offender, so we're the victim, but no one uses that word. Anyway, women who have been, going back to my reading voice, could never be a newsreader. I'm too not professional. Women who have been treated very badly over a protracted period of time. This is me trying to be a newsreader and trying to be serious. Especially if this bad treatment or abuse started in childhood, may have few boundaries and often have a feeling that they deserve to be treated badly by others. They may find saying no difficult or impossible. They may have a feeling that others, especially their intimate partner, has a right to treat them as he wishes. These women will be highly vulnerable to further abuse. I'm so called out. Some people may have a natural feeling of where their boundaries lie and have no issues in protecting themselves from abuse. For others, there is a need to consider this issue and work to deliberately, consciously, build boundaries. This is true especially for women who have suffered DV, domestic abuse, and found that over time their boundaries have been dismantled by their abuser. Yes, 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 yes. So the first thing that comes to me while reading this is that thing. I don't know if it's a saying or something they just sort of teach you in domestic violence groups and stuff. If you have not set boundaries, many boundaries before in your life, then you learn your self-worth. You get some self-esteem. You decide you don't want to be treated crap anymore, and you start setting boundaries like, I'm not going to let someone put me down. I'm not going to let someone take advantage of me or take money, or friends who say, oh, I want your money and don't pay you back. There might be little situations in your life where you start setting boundaries and start saying the word no, or just a similar sentence like maybe later, or those people who you can ask to do something, they're like, oh yeah, no. And that's just how they've been since you met them. Whereas if you've always gone yes, 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 the second you pull out a no, people get shitty. Why? Because the people who get shitty when you start having boundaries are the people who were taking advantage of the fact that you had weak boundaries. So you can let that man or woman go. On social media, you might see my comments randomly. I have another TikTok account that's just my account, that's not my podcast account, just so I can cruise around, look at stuff, leave stupid comments. And there's so many times when people ask, I think it's mostly on Facebook. I have a fake one there where I can just chat and stuff. And people ask for advice and everything. And there's one where I always say, like, if someone's like, oh, should I leave this guy? And they list like a million red flags. And I say, let that. And I have the mango emoji. Let that man go. Let that man go. Oh, so funny. Anyway, sorry, just lost every freaking listener and follower that I have. Oh, you can't help who you are. You can't help who you are. Be you. Be proud. Okay? And while you're there, let's set some boundaries. Oh, the worst segue ever. But let's get back to it. So have you heard that? Have you heard that? That as soon as you start setting boundaries and loving yourself, knowing your worth and practicing boundaries, and this happens to a lot of people who've been through DV, come out the other end and they're doing the healing. And they're starting to love themselves and realize, wow, I didn't deserve that. I'm actually a person and I deserve as much respect as the next human being. And they get actual self-esteem and start setting boundaries to protect themselves so that doesn't happen again. They don't start being, oh, actually, I have met some that go like all bitter and cranky because that's like a fear-based projection from a trauma perspective. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about boundaries. Where if someone's like, oh, can I take this from you? Can you do this for me? And in your gut, you're like, no. But in the past, you've sort of felt guilty or something and they've maybe used a bit of emotional manipulation. You've gone, yes. But now you've never really wanted to do it before. So now you're starting to go, actually, maybe later. You know how people can go, maybe later? I was never a maybe later person. And people used to ask me to go out like clubbing with them when we were young, like young adults. And I'd say, oh, I don't really feel like it, or I'm doing this other thing. And they go, oh, come on, please, no, I really want you to, please. And they'd push me. Years after that period of time, you know, in Australia, you're 18 when you're allowed to go out drinking and clubbing and stuff. So those 18 to 21 kind of years. Years later, I reflected and realised people would ask me to do things and I would try and say, oh, I don't really want to, or I've got this other thing. And I'd say I actually have this other thing on. And they go, oh, don't go there, cancel it, please. Like, come to this instead. Like, come with me. I want you to come. And I would go, oh. And sometimes, a lot of the time, I go, okay, I will. Or because I found it hard to say no. And then I realized I have never done that to someone else. Like, if someone even hints at no, like if I say, hey, would you like to go to this movie or go out for coffee or something to a friend, and they go, oh, I don't really want to, or oh, I think I have something else on that day. If they're hinting at any kind of no/rejection, I am like, oh, okay, I won't ask again. Like, I'm not going to push. And I realize other people like push and they say, do it. It's the people with self-confidence, people with healthy parent models that hugged and both said, I love you, and mentally supported them and have these beautiful households they grew up in. I don't know. I'm assuming that's where they get their confidence. They will say, oh, come on, I want you to, come with me. Whereas I realized I would not. If someone said no, I was like, oh, you don't want to go out? Okay. And so just that confidence to sort of know your worth and put forward, hey, actually, I want this. I'm going to ask, I'm not telling you to go around nagging people, like if they say no, like you still you respect their boundaries, but I never pushed on anyone else's. I had none of my own, and I was just like this weak boundaried sponge. Is it a sponge in a way? Yeah, it's kind of weird. And so when you start find out what a boundary is and then start setting them, the only people who get upset are those who've taken advantage of them. And so many women after domestic abuse and after starting to recover and set boundaries will come into groups and say, I've lost all my friends from work, all their friends from like their social life, all these different friends. And they say, I have no one left. And they said, I just started loving myself, knowing my worth, not being snooty, not being bitter and mean, just realizing how they were being like, it's like your eyes open at how you're being treated by people, and you realize, I've been putting up with this. No, I don't want this for my life. And you start cutting out people who aren't good or trying to stand up to people, and they're like, wait a minute, that's not the you I know. And it does happen, because everyone who was attracted to you was attracted to this person who just shut up and did what you said, or you talked down to them and they went, that's so funny. But when you start going, that's so funny, when they're putting you down and laughing, when you stop laughing back, when you say, oh, could you not say like that anymore? I've just realised like it actually hurts my feelings. And they might come back with like anger or aggression. And what do you mean? But you always laugh at that. And, oh, you've changed. You're a bitch now. You know, you're going to get a lot of pushback when you start having self-worth and standing up for yourself. And it is so common that all your friends go, and people in domestic violence services, domestic violence counsellors, and people like me who've been through it, and it's so many years on, you know that it's like a whole reset and you've got to start again. I have some stories. We'll do story time. We'll wait, hold them for story time. Oh, apologies. Yeah, I didn't release enough episodes last week, whatever. I didn't release enough, but what of it? What of it? What are you going to do? Huh? Take my 0 cents off me? See, I have attitude now. Okay, not in real life, actually. Actually, this is a thing. When you start setting boundaries, you actually see yourself from the outside when you switch into people pleaser mode. So I might try and have a bit of attitude like that and go, oh, look at me. Well, this is too bad. Usually it sort of starts as a joke in me attempting to be like that. But then I thought, in real life with certain people, you just flick back into people-pleasing mode because you feel safe, like it keeps you safe. But then you become more mindful of it, and you slowly over time don't have to do that anymore. And then you realize, wow, I'm like a person. I'm like everyone else now. And you realize how vulnerable you were. And that's what the words on the screen that I just read, the article about boundaries that I just read, that's what it said. It said that we are going to be targets for perpetrators of abuse. And it might not be romantic relationship perpetrators. It might be friends who take advantage of others or pretend to be their friend just to get something out of them. Or there's those friends that aren't really your friend, but they just want a wingman to go with them for somewhere, but they don't actually value a friendship or want to actually know you for you. There's so many different ways you can be sort of exploited, and for some reason they're like a moth to the flame, and we're the flame. Your vulnerability stands out. And it frustrated me when I was first like healing after DV and getting to know myself and everything. It was like, how do I hide that I'm really vulnerable and that I am so loving? And if someone looks at me sideways and says, oh, I love you, I'm going to be like, really? Let's run away together, like all those Disney movies told me when I was little. Like, that's still in there. That little Disney princess, she's still in there, and I have her wrapped in like barbed wire and everything to just not let her out, because it's still there. Like, you're still you still love, you still have empathy, you're still a good person, but you learn to have that wall. And it's kind of like auditioning people to come onto your stage, and I'm just making this up as I go, you're the stage manager of the big theatre, the theatre in New York City. No one's going to get that. Oh my goodness. Have you have you seen the show What We Do in the Shadows? Watch the show What We Do in the Shadows. I think it's on Stan in Australia. There's this amazing app, actually. I don't know if it's just Australian. It's called Just Watch. And if you hear of any show or movie, or on TikTok how they have those clips of those weird movies, and you're like, that looks so cool. You type in the title of the movie and it'll show you what streaming service it's currently on, if it is on one, that you can access in Australia. I don't know if Just Watch the app works in other countries. Anyway, I couldn't help but quote, that's a line from What We Do in the Shadows. It's this vampire comedy. It's so good. It's so good. I love it when he goes, New York City. And I'll just randomly be walking around with my daughter and being like, New York City. She's like, can you not? And then I'll be like, oh. And I'll try and slip New York City into conversations that it shouldn't be in. Like, oh, we're like in a city. Just say we're in like one of the capital cities of Australia. And I'll be like, yeah, this is all right. I mean, it's nothing on New York City. She's just like, can you not? Like, can you not? This is why I'm single. This is why boys hit me. No, it's not. Because they're deranged. If you don't like someone being freaking hilarious, just move along, sunshine. You don't have to try and murder them, loser. So just as I said loser just then, like the loser I just said, I pressed stop and went back because I was like, I'm not keeping this on this episode. And when I dropped that first random, like I was just imagining a theatre, and then that scene from that show, What We Do in the Shadows, came to me. And when I pulled out that first New York City, I cracked up listening to that and I was clapping. I was like, yeah, that is so funny. And I know I was the only one, so apologies for that. And then it kind of went on for too long. And then I was losing my mind laughing at the fact that I then start talking about an app where you can find shows and, oh, how cool this show. And I was like, no one knew I had ADHD. No one ever told me. No one. How did they not know? Apologies for that. How do I segue back to the topic? Yeah, I actually decided I'm leaving it in. I guess it's my way of culling off people who are serious and give too many shits, and they're all professional, pompous assholes. Like if you're too snotty and like, if that was so, like you have to stick to the topic. I want a topic podcasted. Give me the information. Why can you not stay on topic? You can shove it up. Yeah. You know, I didn't used to speak like this ever. I had no self-esteem. If I had a podcast a few years, even only a few years ago, I would have tried to figure out what you want and tried to be the best of that. And I would have tried to be fake, and I would cut out any bullshit like that. Like there is no way I would have left that in there for my own entertainment, knowing that you're gonna probably all unfollow or whatever. Like I would try and please you, and I would hate myself because I would always get bad like feedback and always get like rejection in life and things like that. Then I've just realized that's life. Not everyone's gonna like you, but you've got to be yourself, because being fake is just not living a genuine life. So here I am. Okay, so now that all those snotty bitches have gone, hi, welcome Real Club. Love you. All right, so let's try and get back to the topic. I'm just going to be open about it. I'm not segueing shit right now. Right, what was I even talking about? Oh, because I said in the theatre. Yeah, so you've got to imagine that you're not a stage manager, you're directing a play and you've got to audition people. And you think, oh, well, in that situation, if you're the director of a play, of course you're going to audition people. And at first when you try and set boundaries, you think, I'm not a director though. I'm no one. Why do I deserve it? It takes so much therapy and time to realize you do deserve it. You do deserve to have boundaries. You do deserve to tell people to rack off if they're not treating you well. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to swear and carry on and be silly like me. I mean, I'm only silly on the podcast. In real life, I try to be polite to people. I'm like, I try to be polite. I'm not cocky. I don't walk around with an attitude. There's no way. I mean, I've only just, being recovered myself where I don't know how long, a decade I've been learning to set boundaries. And intensive getting better at that in the last few years. So I'm coming from someone who didn't believe they were worthy to stand on the stage to audition, let alone be the director, and say, no, I won't accept that. So I've come a long way. And I don't know, do you feel like you have no self-esteem? I remember when I was 24 and I went to, I think it was like a counselor, psychologist, something, and they said, you need more self-esteem. And they thought my work here is done. And I was like, so how do I get it? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, do I go to the self-esteem shop? And they're like, I don't know. I just know that you don't have any. You have like none. And you need to get some. Yet they could not answer how. I now know how you can get some. It's a long story. I'm not tangenting onto that. But I then felt guilty because all he said was, you don't have, I think it was a he, I don't remember. All they said was, you don't have self-esteem. You need to get some. And so I felt, I was like, everything that had happened in my life up to that point, which wasn't as bad as after that point, I'm going to just say, up to that point was actually just normal life, like highs and lows, not major freaking traumas. Anyway, I was like, it was like not victim blaming because I wasn't a victim at that point or anything, but it was just like, okay, that's my fault. So I felt even worse, like I have no self-esteem, I feel bad. And so I tried to emulate someone with self-esteem. Oh, when I worked in radio. Yes. When I worked in radio, the head announcer person said, you don't have much self-esteem. You are kind of coming across like you don't like yourself much. You just need to be more confident. Like, this is after a while. They loved me, by the way, at first. Like, I wasn't even meant to stay there or do the job, but they really liked me. So I got employed as a radio announcer and a promotional face. They said face of the station. So I was out in the car at times doing crosses and being facey, being a face, being a promotional face, and also in the studio and that. So he was saying, yeah, that's how you're coming across. So I went, okay, I'm going to emulate what I believe is someone with a lot of confidence. So the next week the next day, the next shift I came in, and I was like, what I thought confidence was. And then he pulled me aside and went, you just sound cocky now. And I was like, what? I was mortified to hear that. As someone with no self-esteem, I'm like, how do I go from like, you tell me I have no self-confidence to, oh, you being too cocky? This is me emulating what I think a confident person is. And they say, and that's actually documented, that people who have little to no self-esteem, like very low self-esteem, if they try and be, in inverted commas, I'm doing with my fingers right now, that's the sound effect of it. If they try and be confident, they come across as cocky. Oh, sorry, I hit the mic. I keep hitting. You keep hearing that, don't you? That I keep using my hands. Oh, it's all silly today. I did have some Coke Zero, and that's all it takes to get me all silly. Where was I? So that's actually a fact. So part of boundaries is having that self-esteem, that self-worth, to know that you are worthy of setting these. The first time you go to set a boundary, you're like, what's the difference between boundaries and aggression? You don't want to come across as aggressive. And some people do that too. So trying to have self-esteem when you don't have any, you can come across as cocky. And trying to have boundaries when you don't have any, people can flip into anger and look like a little animal that's fearful and scared because they don't know how to set boundaries. And honestly, it's practice. It takes practice, seeing how people respond and getting that natural confidence from, no, I've set these boundaries before. And if someone goes, oh, you're rude or something, but you've said that same thing in the same situation to other people and they've taken it really well, you can just know that that person is probably the problem. And that's so weird for me to say, oh, no, they've got a problem in that situation, because I would always blame me in every single situation in my life. I would think, well, it's got to be my fault. I'm the stupid one. I'm the crap. It's got to be me. I've obviously said something wrong, or I'm not good looking enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm stupid, or it was always that low self-esteem keeping me from setting boundaries. So I do it now, and it still takes practice. I'm still practicing, and sometimes I slip up and set one too firmly. I'm trying to think of examples. Like, I think there was one recently where I was just like, no. And my daughter's like, Mum, could you be nice? And I was like, but I had to say a word quickly in whatever situation. And the person was being very aggressive and demanding and entitled. I don't even remember, I can't even remember the situation. I just remember I had to respond quickly with one word, and I just said no. And I'm like, oh, you're literally in your brain, I'm tossing between going, no, thank you. I think I said no, thank you, actually. No, thank you, but nice and firm, no, thank you. Or, oh, okay, yeah, no, oh, what did you want? Yeah, all right. And then talking to them for a while and go, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry, no. And then they're like, oh, but blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh, yeah. And then you try and think of excuses. What I'm imagining now is a salesperson in the middle of the shops. And I don't know if that was a situation. I honestly can't remember. I can only remember that I set a quick boundary, and I thought I was being okay. And she's like, that's not nice. That was a bit mean. And I was like, so it's still learning, right, I just wanted to feel, and I told her and we reflected on it, where what made me set it firmer than normally would have, and that I found that the person demanding a thing was being very entitled and rude. And so I knew that I had to set a quick one with a bit of firmness, but I'm still learning, honestly. And that's how it is. I'm learning how to keep safe and keep away from vultures. Sometimes it's like that. They sense that, oh, you're vulnerable, and you're like, no, not me. Honestly, I'm here with all this self-esteem and confidence that I've got from this wonderful childhood and life that I've had. So it is going to be hard at first. It's finding that line. It's finding when you set them, people respect you, but you can't be too blunted affect. You have to be warm and nice. And so when I go into warm and nice, I sometimes flip straight into people pleasing and just become, I feel safer. Sometimes I feel safe either being completely closed off or being super people pleasy. It's finding that middle ground. When you've never had that middle ground, you've always been super people pleasy. And now you're okay, try and figure this out. So that's boundaries. And I actually feel that I'm doing well now. And I will share a story time in the next episode about losing friends and setting boundaries. I don't think I'll call it that because that's a lot of words to fit on that little picture I do. Okay, so I'm going to actually look for advice on how to set boundaries from someone who doesn't just talk shit and go off on diverts all the time. So according to families.org.au, it's an Australian website, steps to setting a boundary. Communicate clearly and calmly that you would like your spouse to stop their behaviour. Try to leave the room and find a space away from your spouse if they don't stop emotionally hurting you. Do steps 1 and 2 consistently. I did, and he didn't stop. Now, discontinue this particular approach if it becomes unsafe and skip below to what do I do next. Ooh. Yeah, because none of that worked. For example, let's say your spouse calls you nasty names. Tell them clearly and calmly to stop. You could say something like, stop calling me names. Literally. So that this is clear, direct, and keeps the emotional impact low. The less emotion you show, the better. Yes. I know I've said this before in some other episode somewhere. The less emotion you show, the better. And because I had worked as a mental health nurse, where you are doing what we call verbal de-escalation, and you're basically negotiating with very heightened, very unwell, or very substance-filled, or a mixture of both people who are being possibly in a violent episode, you learn that skill to keep talking firmly but no emotion, just firm facts. And so I had learned that. So in an abusive relationship that I was in, I used those skills to say, please, I'm asking you to stop the behavior of XYZ because it is impacting da 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 da. And I thought that in most situations that will help. But this person was planned, calculated, and just, they were going to do what they were going to do. But it would have helped because it did help because if I emotionally reacted, that would have been reactive abuse. And I would have given them all this evidence of me carrying on like a pork chop. And they would have used that against me to frame me as the perpetrator. So very important note there. I'm going to keep reading. This is really good. Okay, so the next part is try to leave the room or find a space away from your spouse if they don't stop. Disengaging shows them you're not going to tolerate the behaviour. It shows a clear boundary and tells them that if they choose to call you a name again, they can't have a conversation with you. I would be chased if I locked myself somewhere after being pursued to try and get that disengagement because that's what I knew. I knew disengage. So I tried to disengage. I couldn't leave because he'd steal my keys, he'd steal my phone, my purse, he'd lock me in the house. So I'd try and find somewhere to disengage and he would tear handles off doors, kick doors down. He would aggressively pursue me. But I'm glad I still did these things because if I hadn't done these things, it would have looked like a he said, she said. It would have looked like it could have been me pointed out as like, it's that if you are disengaging, you are highlighting their behavior for them to see themselves because you are not engaging in it. You're not becoming a part of it. It says call out bad behavior every time it occurs. Yes. Vocalizing concerns only occasionally can send the message that you're not serious about the boundary. Sadly, this can give the manipulative spouse more reasons to continue when you tell them to stop. If you're planning on setting a boundary, be committed to repeating steps 1 and 2 as long as it's safe consistently. Stop if the situation becomes unsafe. In healthy relationships, new boundaries can be mildly uncomfortable, but in abusive relationships, they can be scary or even outright dangerous. So yes, I did all these things, and I'm glad I did because they did, even though he was really bad and continued to be violent because he had this weird plan in his head, it was really good that I didn't just engage and I set those clear, do not do this, blah, 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 blah. Try not to have that emotion, try not to react. And I called out everything. I said, so what you're doing now is called gaslighting. So what you're doing now is called circle talk. Like, I was educated in DV at this time and I called things out and he had a way to twist everything. He would talk back to everything, but I wouldn't engage in that. I'd say, so what you're doing is this and it's this and this and I don't like it and I'm asking you to stop. No, you blah, 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 you blah, 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 blah. You don't get in the back and forward. So I like how it's saying how in an abusive relationship you set those boundaries, but they're obviously these people are unhinged. They are going to disrespect them, but you've set them because you never know. In maybe milder cases, you clearly call out, hey, this is gaslighting and this is what it is and I do not like it. And if you don't do it without emotion or aggression, they're going to maybe there are people who are not like, maybe are there people that aren't that bad and may listen to you and go and seek help to change their behavior. Is it possible? Do lepers change their spots? I don't know. But that's really good. So the last thing I want to tell you about boundaries was what I learned in my first ever DV course that taught me what a boundary was. So they got us to draw a picture of a house where all the doors were open and anyone in the neighbourhood could come and go and do what they wanted in that house. It was an open house for anyone to walk in, had no locks, no doors, no windows. Well, it had window holes, but you know what I mean. It was open. And so we all drew these houses and people were just in there and it was all messy because people just came off the streets and did whatever they wanted in there. And, you've seen those abandoned houses where people have gone in and there's like graffiti on the wall, the furniture's just thrown around, like the place is trash, like they've been abandoned for years. And they were talking about that, so we all sort of drew pictures like that. And then they said, right, now draw a house with really good locks, really good security, really good doors and windows, and everything secure and safe, and put you and your family or whatever it was in there. And so everyone's house had like good doors and that, and it was all clean inside, and just the people who were meant to be there were in there, and things were kind of where they were meant to be. And they said, well, compare the two. The first one has no boundaries, no doors, nothing protecting them, and the second one does. Look at the first one. It's just chaos, and it's not good, and it's not healthy. And the second one is safe and protected. And that is how I learnt what boundaries were. I had no idea before that. So while visually I can't tell you that, hopefully that resonates with someone, because I had no idea before that point. So boundaries. Gotta have them. You deserve them. Think of confident people in your life. And if you like their colleagues that you deem confident, people you spend time around, I don't know if you're in the staff room or what you do for work, but just observe someone. So think in your head, right, who is in my life that I think is confident? And next time you're around them, just observe how they talk, how they set boundaries, how if someone makes them uncomfortable, how they do. I've noticed, because I've been observing people to learn too. I think who's confident. And I watch that when there's someone a little bit unhinged near them, how they separate themselves from that. They may physically get up and move to another area, but it's not obvious. They don't do it dramatically. They find like a reason to do it, and it's so subtle. Or they'll say something and it just gets respected, whereas we're kind of stumbling over our words when we're setting boundaries because we're just so unsure of ourselves. But that is the hottest tip, is just to watch people that you think, if you think they're confident, then watch what they do and how they set those boundaries and how they get that respect and what they're doing. And I'm not saying be like other people. Be yourself. Be all the fun you, be the silly you, be the serious you, be the sad you, be the angry you. Oh, yes, women are allowed to be angry. If someone tried to kill you, you're allowed to feel upset about that. That's another thing to observe. Observe men showing anger. How men can go, oh, that's bullshit. And then as soon as you see it, imagine a woman in that same situation standing right there, saying it the same tone with the same volume and the same words. Imagine a woman standing there going, that's bullshit. And imagine how differently she might be treated. And just watch how they are allowed to show all that emotion of anger, whereas a woman, if she does, she's crazy. I think men, so many women are attracted to a man who can cry. They think it's hot because men who don't cry are dangerous. Subconsciously, we know that. So a man who can cry, we're like, great. So men can cry and women can be angry. I think we're all human. We're all people. We should all be allowed to just have our life experiences and express what's good and what's bad. We should all be able to laugh out loud, be silly, be serious, be angry, be sad, cry, not cry. We should all be allowed to. It shouldn't be certain sexes can only do things, because look at how toxic it is for all of us. I'm so glad things are changing. Oh, TikTok. And TikTok's mostly young people. I talk to so many people in my generation and they're like, oh, I'd never use that. And I'm like, please do. Please. Because when you go on TikTok, you learn so much about feminism, about the world, about so many different things. There's a lot of people I know who need TikTok, and I highly recommend, and they don't go on it, and I'm like, oh, I wish you would, because you'd learn a thing or two. Anyway, that's it for today. I've talked a lot. Boundaries. Get some. You deserve it. You're worth it. Stay safe. Love your legends. Bye.